We're live here on Playback. How you doing today? It's been a minute.
Doing well, yeah. Just been catching up on playoff games. I had a friend's wedding this weekend or last weekend, so missed a lot of games, and so just trying to kind of catch up. Watch some of them casually, when I catch time and whatnot. But kind of keyed in on the three most compelling Western Conference series to try and follow. Obviously, one of those is now concluded, but it's still pretty compelling for the 5 games it existed despite being a 5-game series.
Yeah, it's been pretty fun playoffs so far, especially some of these closer matchups. These great teams going head to head. I mean, we're going to be in the second round and probably have it feels like 4 or 5 really good teams that had an outside chance to win it all just won't be in the playoffs anymore, and that's how it works. Matchups and series dictate who moves on, and I'm sure we'll dive into a little Lakers T-Wolves here, Clippers Nuggets, and some general NBA playoffs, I'm sure. And we gotta give you a shout. The first guest of the Learning Basketball podcast, Jackson Frank, is back, ready to dive in. We the first thing we did was cover a lot of East contenders, so it's nice to kind of bring things around full circle and dive into some of the West teams that look like they will be contending as well. And I think we could dive in right into Clippers Nuggets if you want. That's probably the best first round matchup I think before the series, and has pretty much played out that way as well, where it still feels like either team can come out of this. And the Nuggets got the last big punch. I mean, Jamal Murray with one of the all-time performances. He became the only player in NBA history with 40 points on just one free throw or fewer. I mean, just the most ethical hooper to ever hoop out here. Man, his one of a kind, and it wasn't even a blowout. I mean, it turned into a pretty close game. Like the Clippers cut it to single digits in the fourth quarter. Westbrook was going off, Jamal was going off, but what was your first impressions of that game? And it's just nice to see Jamal looking like Jamal again after something of a hiatus for a year or two.
Yeah, I texted one of my buddies watching that game live that I feel like Jamal Murray explosions are some of the most enjoyable that we have among stars or pseudo stars, whatever you want to call them at this point. But beyond that, beyond his incredible shot making on and off the dribble, or off the catch, off the dribble, excuse me. I was very surprised with how unsharp or dull, rather, maybe the Clippers defense was. Obviously a top 3 or 4 unit all season. I think they were 3rd or 4th in defensive rating on cleaning the glass. Just were not well buttoned up, and the Nuggets offense, especially that 3-man game with Gordon, Murray, and Jokic, requires a lot of buttoned up. And part of the issue is that even if you're 93% precise rather than 99, they're just such a diverse and multifaceted unit with all the options they can have out of that kind of that horn set, that DHO set they run there, that if you're not really nailing it down, they're going to find something. So that was what kind of took me off guard so much. Obviously, the main culprit of that win, you would say, is Jamal Murray, and then also supplemented by 21 points from Russell Westbrook. When you get that sort of production from your two of your best guards, and then I thought Christian Brown probably had his best game of the series as well on both ends. That was kind of what popped to me, is how kind of much that backcourt kicked the Nuggets or the Clippers' ass, and just kind of how undisciplined they looked defensively, the Clippers, for a unit that's usually supposed to be kind of regarded as one of the best in the league. They found some stuff late, kind of the classic. They put the true center on a Russ or an Aaron Gordon, which they did with Zubats. Didn't play Ben Simmons at all in the second half. Went with Batum as their small ball 5. Kind of had I think James Harden was mostly guarding Jokic. Worked well. The tough part now is you've given the Nuggets 2 days or a day and a half to game plan for that, and Jokic is the most versatile / best offensive player we have in the league. So they're going to find a way to counter that, I'm sure. But at the same time, the Clippers are a really smart defensive staff. Jeff Van Gundy's gotten a lot of praise for kind of revamping things, so I'm sure they'll have something up their sleeve. But just the lack of execution from them defensively, I thought was pretty appalling. But even offensively, it didn't feel like they were super sharp. It felt like the Nuggets, are understandably not a great defense, and they were kind of able to get whatever they wanted. But, I think sometimes it's natural that when you're getting whatever you want offensively, you might not be as dialed in defensively. And that's so. That's kind of what I took away from the Nuggets. I think maybe their lack of defensive punch, but granted, they have a much lower ceiling defensively than the Clippers, but I think you probably say the same vice versa for the offense versus the defense of these groups, right? You'd probably take the Nuggets ceiling and consistency of their offense over the Clippers, even if the Clippers were rolling offensively down the stretch of the regular season and at times in this series. But yeah, I think the defense for the Clippers has to be a lot better if they want a chance of extending the series and not going down 22 points in the fourth quarter, just regardless of their admirable comeback to an extent. Kind of a fake comeback, never got within 2 possessions. You just got to be a lot better to kind of close that out and get back home court advantage, which they can't do now unless they win the series. So.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, one of the biggest things that stood out was just kind of that defensive effort. Like you're talking about one of the from the Clippers, or lack thereof, was that you're talking about one of the best defenses in the whole league all season. Two guys who might be all defensive players, and neither one of them is named Kawhi, between Zubats and Chris Dunn, that have shown at least that they can play at that level of impact. And they just I don't want to say a no show, but like it also felt like Jamal just caught fire, and like there was little, like I don't know how you necessarily stop Jamal when he's rolling like that, other than sending like 2 at him, because he just doesn't need much space to get his shots off. It's almost like funny to think like he's one of the best like scorers ever. He's quite literally the best playoff riser when it comes to points per game from regular season jump up to playoffs. And yet he doesn't really create separation to do it. He just has this insane feathery shooting touch from any angle when he's hitting it. He pulls up for that heat check logo 3 last night as kind of a kill shot. He's hitting like turnaround, pull up, fade away, deep twos. Like he's not worried about his foot behind the line. Like he's just gonna take whatever shot he wants. And when he's feeling it like that, I mean, there's not much you can do. But you did mention like some of the adjustments in the game. Like it seemed like they threw Harden up against Jokic at one point as the game went on, to try to see if that could slow down Jokic, even though he wasn't really even the one going. But at the very least, Harden is kind of known for that post-up defense to kind of be his sneaky strength on the defensive end, when he might be more of a gambler otherwise, where he has a good base there. And Jokic really didn't score very much. I think it was like 13 points on 13 shots or something pretty close to that in that matchup. So, that seems like an adjustment that maybe will go into the next game, that will carry over. Maybe they'll break that out from the beginning. And if Jamal isn't, on fire, maybe it'll be a little more closer to the rest of the series. Because like you said, I mean, that 3-man game is just like near impossible to stop as it is. Like it was already one of the best 2-man games before they brought in AG for that dunker spot, roller, off ball option to finish the plays when, the defense breaks down a little bit. Speaking of AG, how about the first game-winning buzzer beater tip slam in NBA playoff history a few games ago?
Yeah, I was impressed with the level of focus the Nuggets brought in Game 5, because down the stretch of Game 4, you could see they were pretty worn out. Playing a short bench, even shorter with Westbrook missing Game 4. The Clippers kind of dialed up their intensity and nearly did come back in Game 4. And I think obviously, Gordon's spectacular game winner was phenomenal, but the fact that the best shot they got before that was a Jokic fading 3 kind of spoke to the level of fumes they were running on by that point. That's not the takeaway from a win. A win is a win in the playoffs, but for the Nuggets to respawn in Game 5 after kind of nearly blowing that giant lead, I think speaks a lot to the players and the coaching staff and kind of the tweaks they made. I think Jamal being so willing to hunt for his own shot, because all series, what the Clippers have tried to do is take away that pocket pass, right? Whether it's switching, bringing extra help on the backside when they're playing drop, blitzing, they don't want Jokic to get the ball in the pocket there. And so a lot of it is single coverage for Murray. And I think he just came out with the level of aggression and the proper disposition to get to his spots, which is a little quicker than the guys on him, get into his spots with his footwork and kind of that pep in his step. Obviously, like we said, not like a wow athlete, but I do think when he's going, like we saw on Tuesday, and then throughout the Nuggets title run a couple of years ago, he just has kind of a certain bounce, plays on his toes. It's just a little quicker to rise to his spots than defenders. I thought he did well to kind of hunt some advantageous switches at times, whether it was a slower guy, a guy with a little less size, and just get to his spots. Now, there are a lot of tough shots, but at the same time, a guy of Murray's caliber, shot maker of his caliber, if you can't shut him off from his spots and he's having a heater like that, your defense isn't sufficient enough, which isn't always to say that the defense is doing something wrong, but you got to take a guy's, shut his water off more so than just letting him, kind of forcing him into certain spots, I think is the big thing there. And for Jamal to have that level of volume, I think was kind of a response to what the Clippers have been doing all series, and also him kind of recognizing that he had to be kind of the shepherd of the offense in that game because of how much they were selling out against Jokic. And so I'm super curious to kind of see if there are any adjustments. You would think probably they don't tweak it too much, the Clippers, because I think it's obviously a win if you kind of tilt a little more toward Murray and let him get that pocket pass, let him get the pass over the top. So that's kind of what I'll be monitoring. But I think a lot of it's just backside rotation for the Clippers. I didn't think Dunn and Zubac were necessarily the culprits at all. I think it's, not only did they tweak the defense to put Harden on the ball more, I think they want to take him off the ball. I guess put him on the ball because he's such a poor off ball defender. Beginning of a handful of baseline cuts basically every game. It felt like to Brown or to Westbrook or even to Gordon at times when they've had him to kind of use that post strength. So that's kind of the big thing. Then Powell's is in a very effective defender in addition to his kind of mercurial offense this series. Just hasn't really been the same since that, I think, hamstring injury right on the All-Star break has kind of lacked the same pop that he had pre-All-Star game when he was in kind of some All-Star game discussions or All-Star appearance discussions. So I think that's kind of the bigger thing. It's just kind of what level of defensive attention they get on the backside there, with how much attention they're showing to the Jokic Murray 2-man game. And then, as we say, even the 3-man game involving Gordon. So I think Kawhi has to be better there as well. Harden, Powell. Do you go to more Batum in place of Powell, maybe in place of Dunn? I thought Dunn was quite good in game 5 because he hit shots and his defense is always very good and impactful. And I think he was 5 of 6, maybe 5 of 7 from the field in game 5. But if he starts the game 0 for 4 or 0 for 3, the offense runs a lot less smoothly. So maybe swap Batum in there. Obviously, a very good help defender and kind of denial defender off the ball. So those are kind of the adjustments I'd be looking for. And then, of course, do you get a little more shooting regression from a Westbrook there, right? 21 points, 8 of 14, 8 of 15, something like that. Very efficient game for him. So I think we're in for a really, really good game tonight. I thought as bad as the Clippers played or executed, they weren't entirely out of it. So that's kind of what I'll be looking to see. Can they be a lot sharper on both ends? And can that be met by a little bit of regression from the two Denver guards? But at the same time, you're not going to get another 4 for 13 Jokic game or whatever it is, most likely. A lot of interesting wrinkles here. But on the offensive side, I think Harden and Kawhi just have to be a lot better, especially Harden. Just seem disengaged, which is not a new phenomenon at times for him.
Right.
Just the reality of it, he's less likely to have a terrible shooting game, like a 6 for 20, 6 for 21, and more likely to have a 3 for 9, a 3 for 10, where you're just kind of like, is this all-time great initiator even on the floor in a crucial game? So I think he's going to be a lot better. On the Nuggets side, I think when they've been at their best defensively is when they're playing up high on the backside, taking away that pocket pass, taking away the short roll when they blitz Harden. Harden doesn't really want to seem to make the skip pass, and that's partially at times because the guy in the weak corner is a poor shooter or a shaky shooter. They'll put Kawhi there sometimes, and that does help. But even Kawhi is not the most ready to go off the catch shooter or attacker. So I think that's some of the hesitancy there. But Harden has to be a lot better. I think even Kawhi has to be a good deal better. The Nuggets didn't really well limit Kawhi's scoring volume in this series. Even the game when he had a 39, it was only 19 shots, which, yeah, the efficiency is marvelous. But, when a guy is at one point, was got 12 for 13, you would hope maybe he's getting 25 shots in the game that comes down to the wire. So I think the Clippers' two best players have to be a lot better on both ends, but particularly Harden. And I would look for them to play through Zubac again a lot. I think he's been so awesome this series. The release foul, the post score, just a guy who flashed at the middle as a little push shot. So if Harden is, late series Harden, like he's been at times pretty often, I think you're going to have to really kind of feed Zubac to get 14, 15, 16 shots, particularly with the passing limitation someone like Kawhi has.
Yeah, a ton of great points there. Zubac, starting with him, I mean, I've said before on the pod too, probably he's just been probably the most consistent Clipper the whole year, like the most reliable, type of anchor for them, and really on both ends, like a defensive anchor and also something of a playmaking hub who can finish in the post and in the paint. I mean, super effective last night. It felt like all of the Clippers points, or in Game 5, felt like all the Clippers points came in the paint, and a lot of that was Zubac's just little flip hook shots and putbacks and paint touches. Like, he was getting his. But also on Harden, that's what I wanted to ask next, and you pretty much already hit on it, was your thoughts kind of on Christian Braun and his defense. And like you said, they'll throw different looks at Harden, with maybe blitzing him and forcing the pass and taking away maybe the first or second thing he wants to do, and forcing him to do the thing he least wants to do in that sense.
Yeah, I thought Brown was really good at setting the tone at the point of attack against Harden. I mean, Harden's just such a weird player that, he just has these games where he mystifyingly is disengaged. And it is a very rightful stain on his otherwise incredible legacy as an all-time great. And I thought Brown used that to his advantage when maybe Brown sensed early that, oh, Harden's not here to play today, right? So picking him up early, hitting him with a shoulder, hitting him with a hip, and kind of taking him out of his rhythm in early offense. I think Harden's a guy at his best, doesn't tend to play super fast or produce a lot of transition possessions, but likes to get into those early drag screens, things like that, and kind of flow into the offense, get the defense in rotation. I thought Brown did a really good job of not letting him do that very often. I think had one really nice kind of side swipe steal in the second half, had a couple other plays throughout the game where he just met him early and kind of caught Harden off guard. So, it feels kind of, there are obviously X's and O's rotations or adjustments I've talked a little bit about, but it feels quite simple that the Clippers need their all-star point guard who has a very good all-NBA case. And I think it would not be surprised at all if he makes it, just given kind of way some of the media members have talked about him, maybe what they're thinking with the all-NBA votes. They need him to be a lot better. And given his inconsistent track record, I have no clue what to expect. And I think, honestly, if people within the Clippers organization were honest with you, they wouldn't know what to expect either tonight. So it's a really tough spot to be, and you just need a lot more attention to detail from him. And I think that attention to detail was really what plagued the entire Clippers defense, like I've been saying, in Game 5. So that, and then just Kawhi, I'm curious kind of how they can manufacture cleaner looks for him at times. Denver's done a really good job of kind of crowding his touches inside the arc, because I don't think he has like this super dexterous handle. It's more of like a power handle kind of, where he's just has such giant hands that, he's not kind of, the ball isn't really on a string in the way you would have it like a Steph Curry or Kyrie Irving when they handle the ball. And so I think they've kind of made use of that with throwing an extra body when he dribbles inside the arc, a stunt, a dig, things like that. And it feels like a lot of his buckets the last few games have been on broken plays or early offense, transition, things like that, where you're not like, it's not Kawhi running high pick and roll, or things like that. So I think he has to be better as well. But I don't want to lump him into the same degree of responsibility to improve his play as Harden. But I will say I think he definitely has to be better on both ends. I don't think he was particularly sharp. Despite the nice box score, obviously his box score was far better than Harden's in Game 5. I think he had nearly a triple-double, but I remember watching the game live and seeing that and then rewatching it and be like, did I miss like some really nice passing reads? But it was like sinking off the corners against Dunn, or like, an easy drop-off pass, things like that. So more of a usage assist production rather than like really bending the defense as much. So I think he'll have to be better. But I'm curious kind of where they go at backup 5. Do they play Simmons again? He's had some nice moments this series. Like I said, I didn't play him at all. And second half of game 5, his offensive limitations are just pretty damning. He just has no kind of pop as a scorer and even real flow in the transition game. Obviously, he's still pretty good kind of pushing the pace a little bit and finding guys, but just doesn't have anywhere close to the same level of kind of gravity and thrust that he has a transition force with the Sixers, which is, largely stems from all the back injury he's dealt with the last few years. He's a different, worse caliber of athletes. So I think they'll play a pretty tight rotation. I would not be surprised if they just go 7 deep with Bogdan and Batum. And even Bogdan has largely not been very good in this series, has had his moments, but I think on the whole, given the way that he closed the regular season, the Clippers were hoping for a lot more offensive punch and not as dire of a defensive weak point, despite some nice moments in the almost Game 4 comeback, playing the top of that zone and being physical. So Yeah, and I guess they'll go. I guess they would go 8 with Derrick Jones Jr. Um, but you also got to be tricky. You got to be careful playing, rotating between your two kind of non-shooters, quote unquote, with Dunn and Derrick Jones Jr., which is obviously why they don't play together and why they kind of are just taking turns as the primary Jamal Murray defender. But I wouldn't be surprised if maybe we see a little more Jones on Murray in lieu of Dunn minutes because he has more size and range, maybe a little better ability to deter shots for Jamal Murray. Whereas Dunn, I think, is kind of better at denying touches altogether. I think there's a difference there, right? So if Dunn has a slow offensive game, which he's largely had throughout the series aside from Game 5, I wouldn't be surprised for them to go to DJJ just in favor of a little more range. He's a better finisher, can do a little more on the short rolls to score, which is with explosive athleticism. But I don't think the Clippers are happy with kind of maybe how their bench is performing on the whole, given the way it closed the regular season. I think they were hoping that would be a much bigger advantage over the Nuggets, whose lack of depth is well chronicled the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was part of the narrative before the series was that the Clippers are the better team because of their depth and because of the defense and their consistency throughout the season, while the Nuggets, fired their coach a couple weeks ago and are clearly in some sort of turmoil in-house, and yet Jokic is so good in this core four and just kind of the depth and Coach Adelman has stepped up and he's had good stops along the way and he's really helped them kind of navigate the ship here where they still do what they do best, that three-man game that we've hit on, and just being able to stick to what they know. And they're an offensive machine when they're clicking like that. And, they're hard to stop, but, the Clippers are not really winning the minutes with Jokic off the floor as they thought they would. And that's probably, been a pretty big, like you say, disappointing, that an advantage that hasn't quite been there. And that's interesting about DJJ as well. I could definitely see some of the reasons why, especially like if Jamal is heating up and Dunn is giving you nothing, throw a different defender that can bring a little more, on ball defensive juice along with all the ancillary play finishing and things like that you also mentioned. And yet with Kawhi, it is interesting. He's one of the most efficient players ever. He's one of the most efficient scorers ever. And to your point, like, okay, you're the superstar and you're super efficient. Take more shots. like we need you to be that guy. And not Charles Barkley was kind of talking about this in a different way about kind of the volume of an off night where you're a superstar who's 0 for 11. Well, you should be 0 for 20 because we need you taking those shots because you're the guy. And it kind of works in parallel even for an efficient scorer like Kawhi. Like if it was a role player, that's an amazing night. If it's your number one option, you need a little bit more. So, that's a good point, that the Clippers need their best scorers to step up and play like their best scorers more than anything else. Like if you're going to double Harden, Kawhi needs to be able to get hits. If Kawhi can't create space, then you need that Harden Zubats pick and roll to come back because they've been a machine all year. So Zubats himself has been super impressive on both ends. I think he's shown up, and they just really need these scorers and creators to adjust. I don't know if the Clippers make a ton of adjustments, at least defensively, with what they've been doing. I mean, maybe personnel wise and shortening the rotation, like you're saying, but they have been in a close series this whole time. So I'm interested to see if there's big adjustments or they just kind of chalk up last night as a hot shooting night for Jamal. But, someone we hardly mentioned was Russell Westbrook. I mean, he's been a really important player this whole series. Like, talk about energy. Like, Westbrook's energy practically won the first game in overtime for the Nuggets. He, like, compared to the Clippers' energy, it's just like night and day in terms of like how kind of sluggish they showed up. And then Westbrook and Jamal are just like shooting right out of a cannon to start the game. They started with 32 points in the first half. Westbrook's like he's almost like I don't even know how to say this. Like he was taking Tim Duncan shots basically. Like he was just pulling up for like mid range off the square, top left square.
I think they used him as a roller at one point. He banked in like a 12-footer off the glass, but it wasn't even like all the way like mid post extended. It was like near the paint. It was very, very impressive feat.
Right. It was like where did Duncan Westbrook come from? Like that was the exact play I was referencing there, where they do a little guard pick and roll, and Westbrook is such a strong off ball player, or I should say energy type of roller and mover that it makes sense. He's going to roll hard, and he does have that was his kind of not his area, but he did have that elbow midi pull up his whole career where that was like his go-to shot. So it's in the bag somewhere, even if it's not quite the same efficiency anymore. But man, I mean, they've really needed him, and I think it's cool to see Westbrook kind of find his niche again in a role that he's accepted, where the team excels with him after all these different stops, where it just never felt like the right fit, given the expectations and what his skill sets really bring to the table. That chemistry with Jokic alone, it's like they share a brain in a sense. Like they both know exactly what the other one's thinking when it comes to moving off ball or taking off in transition or anything like that. So he's been a lot of fun to watch, Westbrook.
Yeah, he totally transformed their transition game this year. I think they'd notoriously been a pretty slow-moving team, which makes sense when you have a two-man game led by Jokic as potent as it is. And Murray's a pretty methodical player as well. But I think I don't know where exactly they finished in transition volume this year, but they were way up there in efficiency in terms of kind of points per possession, in transition, and that was largely to Westbrook. I think kind of what he represents to an extent is, I would say, all three of the, let's call them non-shooters, which isn't fair to the year that Aaron Gordon had, but guys that the defenses will live with playing off of on the perimeter. He, Brown, and Westbrook are all really good interior players off the ball, and that makes it tough when paired with Jokic's brilliant interior passing. You just kind of ignore them like you would of the traditional non-shooters. I think that's one of the things that I kind of got wrong in this series. I predicted the Clippers to win in 6. Obviously, they can't win in 6. They're still alive to win the series, but I expect the Clippers to be able to do more damage playing off of kind of the quote-unquote shaky shooters. You can lump Peyton Watson there, of course. He'd be the shakiest of the 4 here, but the least prominent rotation player. But the other 3, Russ, while he's a bit of a shaky finisher the last few years, really good interior scorer or passer himself. Aaron Gordon, we know what he does as a play finisher and how physical he is. Brown is a really physical play finisher as well. So it's not as simple as just playing off of these guys that you are going to live with as shooters, because they'll cut, they'll crash the glass, they'll do a give and go with Jokic, things like that. And I think that's something they've really used well at times in the series against the Clippers, partly because the Clippers aren't a super deep defense. As good as they are defensively, their best defenders, I would say Zubac, Derek Jones Jr., and Chris Dunn, are kind of all, especially in this series, resigned to on-ball duties, right? It's Dunn or Derek Jones Jr. on Murray, and then Zubac, whether he's on Jokic or his goal is to roam and help on Jokic or help on drives, they're all kind of in pretty important positions that you don't have the range to put on you don't have the rangy defender to put on one of these non-shooters. It's a Harden, it's a Powell, it's a Kawhi, and obviously Kawhi is the best of those 3 as an off-ball defender. But like I said, I think he's kind of ebbed and flowed as a defender in this series, despite some really, really good moments. So that's kind of the thing that I miss the most. But I think Russ's kind of tenacity, like you were speaking to, is a good summation of what makes it so hard to just go, oh, these guys can't really shoot. Let's just help on Jokic or help on Murray. And then all of a sudden, Jokic is threading a ball through a keyhole or a dunk or a layup, or it's back to Jokic on a give and go. It's really tough to stop. And that's what's been so impressive to me about Russ overall this year, is how quickly the chemistry with Jokic came about. They don't have any prior, experience playing together. Maybe they've done some stuff together in summer training, but given the way that Jokic presents himself as, a guy who likes to go back to Europe and back to Serbia over the summers, a little surprised. But just the instant chemistry they've had, and that's been Russ's best trait overall this year, is beyond Jokic, which, he is incredible and he's arguably the best passer in the league. It's not a very good passing team until they brought in Russ. And I think Russ just has such a level of kind of willingness to try stuff. Definitely results in points more often than someone like Jokic does, but more often than not, those are out or overshadowed by really nice decisions. So really enjoy what Russ has brought this year. It's so interesting. I think you just see 2 sides of the coin with him, right? You have the people who are like, well, when he's playing well, it's always just a matter of time until he, messes something up to an extent. But I think too often the good stretches are billed as outliers, viewed as outliers the last couple of years. Even though like the Clippers' tenure did not end greatly, he had some really nice stretches with them as well. So I've enjoyed what he's brought, and I do think he'll be pretty important to kind of what the Nuggets do in Game 6, just from a sheer do we have a little bit of playable depth we can tap into? Because we've seen, with Denver and with LA to an extent, or with the Lakers, excuse me, how tough it can be when you get to the end of a game and you maybe only have 5.3 guys you can trust, 5.3 guys you can play, in crucial moments. So if Russ is able to be a guy that you can still trust in key moments, which he's been at times this series, the Nuggets are probably in a good spot. If not, they're going to be kind of dicey, especially given the fifth starter spot, kind of with him versus MPJ. It's kind of been it hasn't been the most reliable position for the Nuggets this year. Some of that is, game one, MPJ was pretty poor. Game four, he was clearly kind of at the worst of that shoulder injury he's been dealing with. Last couple, game three, excuse me. Game three was when the Nuggets got thumped or thwomped. I think he's been a lot better, MPJ. So, I think just holding down that fifth starter spot is really crucial for the Nuggets. And it's not a given that MPJ and or Russ show up, but at the same time, it's not a given the Clippers get a good fifth starter spot, whether it's Dunn, Batum, Derek Jones Jr. So that's kind of another subplot. But yeah, we're talking about adjustments. I don't think the Clippers need to make many adjustments beyond Harden. Can we get the Harden we've seen most of the year? And defensively, can we have the sharpness that we've had most of the year? It's really just playing the level that the defense and Harden have set for themselves this year. And that is still an adjustment, but I don't think there's anything really tactically I would expect to see differently. Because I don't think they need to overreact to an incredible Jamal Murray game. Granted, his playoff track record says it's not completely found that he could do it again, but the laws of general basketball would not that good of a shooting performance, even if we get 27, 28 from him, which, I would not be surprised. He kind of seems like a guy who can snowball those big performances together into kind of a prolonged stretch of strong play, both, in the postseason and at times throughout the regular season, that we've seen through the roller coaster that is Jamal Murray's regular seasons the last 5-6 years.
Yeah, it's nice to see playoff Jamal just do his thing. And yeah, your point on Michael Porter Jr., he just hasn't quite looked like himself. The injury probably is still bothering him, but the last couple games he's hitting his 3-point shots. So I imagine that's mostly what they want from him. I know he made a little bit of a development as like a help side defender, a shot blocker that the last season or two. And, maybe he just isn't quite bringing that same two-way impact and energy. But, on Russ, like his energy has been great. Like I think one reason it's worked so well is that this Nuggets offense is already incredible, and yet they didn't really have a dynamic, explosive guard that could just beat somebody off the dribble, penetrate the paint, downhill force like that, who's pushing the pace, pushing the transition. Like they just didn't really have that type of player. They were great without it. And that just adds a new dynamic to an already great offense. It's like a Swiss Army knife. They just give another, weapon out there that Jokic can kind of pull at any time. And the offense can kind of just lean on at times to be a little bit of a wild card X factor. I mean, that's who Russ is at his core. The 90-10 is always there with him, but you appreciate the good, and you just kind of live with a couple, mistakes, let's say, along the way. And for the most part, it's worked this year. And also, quick shout to DeAndre Jordan, like playing playoff minutes. There was a nice sequence. He blocked Harden's floater, and it became a breakaway throwdown dunk for Jamal Murray, like a real highlight exclamation point.
He had the lob to MPJ on the short roll.
Exactly. DeAndre's been watching a lot of Jokic in practice. He's throwing alley-oop lobs now to Michael Porter off the cut. I mean, DJ's still in it and doing it to, his former team, the Clippers. So he's out here doing it. So shout out DJ. I can't wait to see where this series goes. I mean, I do kind of think Kawhi is gonna show up and do his thing. I do hope that they try to get more shots for him, like we're saying. And honestly, for Harden's sake, I just hope he has a good game and kind of can redeem himself off the last one. Like you said, like we kind of know going in, Harden has never been consistently amazing through a playoff run. Like he will have either a no-show or just a bad game where it doesn't look like he's giving the same level of effort and concern as he does in all the other games. And it doesn't take away from the good, but it makes it hard to rely on that type of player as a lead primary option.
You can say it takes away from the good at times, especially in the the pressurized sense of a playoff series, right? Like
Sure.
if it's a random Tuesday in November and you have a stinker and then call it up 2 days later with, a great
Right.
game, it doesn't hold as much weight, that stinker. But when you got 7 games and you have a terrible game, like I don't think, in general, playoff averages are a really tough thing to kind of look at as the end all be all of a player performance because the games hold more weight. But yeah, he just has to be better. And I think, on Kawhi's point, I think himself has to find also a way to maybe generate a few more shots that aren't just, like I said, a broken play, a push and transition, because the transition game is not really a Clippers forte, despite them clearly making an effort at times to get out and run more in this series. So,
Yeah. You would think Harden takes it more on himself as well to kind of do that because it seems like a lack of aggression. Like it wasn't just missing shots. Like it looked like the effort was just not there. It's like the game didn't matter, as if they're not like 2 away from facing elimination as basically the favorite in the series. So, you hope for his sake and his legacy, he has a little bit of a bounce back because he needs that. And honestly, we thought this Clippers year was the year they would make a little bit of a run. Like they have as much of a shot as anyone in the West outside of Oklahoma City, I think. And it could be a first round exit tonight if they don't get their stars to just show up and do what they've done all season. Because Zubats is going to show up, and that's the one thing I can rely on for the Clippers is that Zubats will be there in the middle. Can they get their actual like superstar, the guys build as those superstars to just show up and give their all? I think that's all you can ask for that.
and
So
I think too, like we get a good Powell game, right? I think he's really bounced around.
yeah,
Um,
amazing start to the season, like all-star level scorer, and maybe Kawhi coming back changed his role and affected the shooting a little bit.
Yeah, like I said, he dealt with a hamstring injury around, took him out for a little bit in late February, kind of after the All-Star break, and I don't think he looks as explosive off the catch. That's kind of one of his hallmarks beyond the great shooting. He's just such an explosive player. Like you get him an advantage, and he's like one of those like change of pace running backs where he just hits the hole and is gone. Whether it's a pull-up jumper, a finish, things like that. But I did like that it seemed like when they were pushing transition at times, when they found some rhythm in game 5, it was Powell with the crossover, things like this big wide crossover that rips off the catch with the hit ahead passes. So, and some of that does stem back to Harden, right? I think Harden is a guy who, like I said, doesn't like to push himself a lot, but is pretty good with the advanced passes. We saw it all the time in Philly with Maxey, and I don't think Powell is of the same level of athlete, but another guy who's a really good kind of off the catch scoring guard. And so if Harden kind of find him for some of those looks, and that would help kind of open up the offense a little bit, let them set the defense, not work too hard. So he's a guy that I'm looking to kind of have a really nice game. But I wouldn't be surprised if he has a tough one because he's been all over the place really since he came back from injury a couple months ago or a month and a half ago. So, and that's just how it goes when you have role players. I think Powell's a nice solid starter, but he would still fall into that role player category. So, yeah, I feel like we've talked about basically every player in this series of major consequence having a good or bad game, maybe determining the tide of game 6. But it does feel pretty.
So how do you think it plays out? I mean, game 6 is tonight. A little bit of a prediction here. It's in LA, Clippers home game 6, and then Denver, earned that home court, so they get game 7 back at home. Both teams have kind of taken their shots and had good games, bad games. I think the Nuggets are kind of rolling a little bit more now, coming off the win, coming off the excitement of the AG tip slam where it wasn't their best game and they pulled it out anyway. So, I'd probably lean that Denver closes it out because of just kind of what we just saw. Like it didn't seem like Harden was invested. It didn't seem like, Kawhi was getting enough shots, and maybe they adjusted and just unleashed Kawhi and just asked him to take all the shots, and that'll be the difference. But the Clippers were really rolling in it becomes a very hard offense to guard when you have basically 2 clear actions that are reliable, and you can kind of go back and forth with the Harden Zubats pick and roll and just a general Kawhi ISO. But you mentioned that like he has tight ball control, like he probably isn't turning it over very often with his handle, but he's also not, dropping every handle move like a Kyrie or Steph and just pulling up for a fadeaway to get any space he wants.
Yeah, he's not playing in tight spaces like the way they do, right? It's a lot of more power based to get to his spots. But I think I agree with you. I would lean Denver, but it's just so hard to know because of the wild card that is Harden, which you
Sure.
shouldn't be saying about a guy who could make an All NBA team and is, has an MVP to his name, and obviously he's not of that caliber anymore, but is still a star level player. But I just feel less confident that he is going to reverse the spiral, just given his track record, and that will make it really tough for the Clippers to have a really kind of free-flowing offense. He is the engine of things. I think Kawhi kind of puts them over the top with his scoring punch, his efficient scoring punch, give you 23, 24, 25, but they're not a super efficient and free-flowing offense if Harden's not doing this thing. And I just trust Jokic to have a better game. I think them kind of leaning more into that 3-man action is going to give the Clippers defense a lot of trouble. It's a little more easily contained when they just go to kind of that empty corner Jokic Murray stuff, which they've done a lot, but they've dialed it back for the series because the Clippers have added some counters to really just kind of pull that weak side tagger all the way over and kind of stop Jokic there or switch the action. So going to more of the 3-man game, I think, was a nice adjustment for the Nuggets in game 5, and clearly paid dividends, whether it was some stuff for AG downhill or Murray just finding just enough of a wiggle room or enough of an angle to get his shot off and do what he does. So I lean the Nuggets, but I think there's enough low-hanging fruit for the Clippers to kind of send this back to Denver for a game 7, but I just don't know if they're going to pluck that off the tree. I don't know if Harden knows I don't know if Harden can look up and see the apple standing right above his forehead. So that's where I go, but I will not be surprised if I'm wrong there. But I'll be wrong either way, because if the Nuggets win game 6, then I get tonight's prediction right, but I would get my series prediction wrong. I'm stuck in a rock and a hard place here, but that's the fun of it.
Yeah, you got to love a good hedge when it comes to the playoff expectations there. And one off question before we switch series here. How would you compare Harden either this year or in his Clippers tenure to his time with Philly, and then maybe both slightly compared to Houston? Like you said, like he was an MVP, 1-man offense in Houston. And I think he's still 80% of that kind of offensive scoring creator engine at his best, where he can score and he can initiate. He's found really, he's one of the best pick and roll high volume creators the league has ever seen. And he's found a great partner in that in Zubac. And maybe it was a little different dynamic with Embiid. So I was just kind of curious with any comparisons or contrasts you might see from, to me, it seems like he's been slightly better since the Philly tenure, because he very well could earn an All-NBA award this year for his consistency.
I in terms of how I would rank his last 3.5 seasons, right? Because he's been with the Clippers for 2 full years basically, and then did a 1.5 more or less in Philly. I would say this year I think was his best among the 3.5, and then his second year in Philly I would put next, and then I would go last year in LA, and then his half season with the Sixers as his worst one, which would make sense too. I think that was his least fresh time off the hamstring injury and was adapting to a new team and all that. But compared to Houston, he just has I think he's a little less disciplined with the ball. His handle's not as tight and has a much lower scoring capacity. Like he's not as much of a volume scorer. The 30, 35 point games feel like abnormal at this point, or aberrations, rather than when he was in Houston. I think he's had more explosion and kind of more capacity to generate space and diversity of shots. Obviously, a much lesser finisher, does not get downhill with as much regularity or as cleanly. It feels like a lot of his drives are painstaking almost, which just, happens. He's 34, 35, and has played a ton of minutes basically every year, and then had some injuries, but obviously still a very good player. It has been fun to kind of watch his pick and roll craft change, because he's played now with Zubac and Embiid, who have a little bit of a mid-range game. Different ways. Zubac is more of the push shot, Embiid's obviously the set jumper. But in Houston, it was the Dwight Howard to Clint Capella as the 5-out. Didn't really have that level of pick and roll partner, but I think this new one serves him better because he can't turn the corner at cleanly, like I'm saying, right? He can't get downhill all the way for the lob. So to be able to kind of use his size, use his handle, use his ability to kind of manipulate angles with footwork and whatnot to kind of open the pocket pass where he doesn't have to play at full speed all the time, I think serves him better. But yeah, the biggest thing to me is just kind of a little sloppier with his handle, and he's more good for 19, 20 points a night, whereas at his heyday in Houston, he had a month 3 average. What was it, 40 whatever, and had average
insane
per season. So kind of almost has halved his scoring rate or scoring production, which I think is somewhat, what their new role demands. But I think the new role is almost born out of kind of athletic limitations and decline. But obviously still a very good player, and it's been, mostly fun to watch. Maybe game 5 aside, and some of the last couple of games against the Mavericks last playoff series as well, when it kind of flipped. The entire Clippers team was on tilt, without Kawhi though as well. But this year they have Kawhi, so yeah. But it's also tough because I feel like I obviously covered the NBA somewhat, when Harden was in Houston, but I feel like I covered a lot more closely, kind of since he joined Brooklyn, since he joined Philly. So I have a better understanding of his game. Not that I wasn't ever watching Rockets games. He was one of the most enjoyable shows in town. So I feel like I have just more nuanced understanding of what makes him good and where he struggles compared to his Houston days. But also, fortunately, there's a lot of people that watched it more in depth than I did and are able to kind of share those insights and kind of glean from them. So yeah, I would say this is his best year though, kind of post Nets tenure to me. But he was still very good in that last year with Philly, especially kind of those couple of those explosive games against the Celtics. But as we've discussed, they were at times offset by a couple of what the hell is going on here? Particularly in Game 7 against the Celtics, which was accompanied by a very poor game from Embiid as well. So for the Clippers' sake, you would hope that Kawhi and Harden do not repeat what the Sixers did in Game 7. But with Harden, you don't know. With Kawhi, I think you feel better that he'll at least deliver a little bit. But yeah, I think he certainly needs to find a way to generate a little more scoring volume, especially if he senses early that Harden doesn't have it going, which wouldn't be Kawhi's fault. But when you notice your teammate who's known to be aloof is being aloof, you should respond accordingly. So hopefully, if that happens, Kawhi is ready to dial up the aggression and the ways to get his spots.
Right, you got no time to waste if you notice somebody else don't got it. Like you're Kawhi Leonard, you gotta just start taking shots like that. And I asked that question and almost not forgot, but skipped over Brooklyn. Like the idea, like, oh yeah, there was 15 games there where KD, Kyrie, and Harden were on the same team. That could have been something, but of course, the injuries and everything kind of stopped that before it even started. But just an interesting kind of path for his career, and that's a good observation. I think that the playing with bigs that have a little more touch, a little more range, can kind of open up that pick and roll into like a small pick and pop, or just a short roll into the mid range, instead of Harden beating everyone off the dribble using that deceleration and then throwing up a floater or a lob kind of thing. Like it does make sense that as he ages and maybe loses a step, loses a little explosive, he can become much slower decelerator, manipulator type of pick and roll creator as he goes, because obviously he still has the elite vision and handle, and that deceleration is a special skill of his, even though it might not be as fast of a first step to make it such a big drastic shift there. But so we'll see what happens tonight. Excited to see it. And I'm not sure who's the winner matched up with in this one.
That'll be OKC. It'll be
okay. So the winner plays the Thunder. Man, either way, that's gonna be a tough one for the next one. But I'd be really excited to see it. Both all these teams are contenders, and somebody's got to beat the Thunder if they want a chance to win it all eventually. And it's just pretty hard to see that happening unless someone can kind of maybe bog down that Thunder offense a little bit and make it a rock fight or a shootout, because obviously that defense is just outlier all time.
Yeah. Their feisty is all hell, and quite good at being feisty too.
No doubt. And so we're fresh off a different series here. We could shift gears. Lakers T-Wolves. They went down to the wire the whole series, kind of here and there, but not really last night. I mean, it was technically the Rudy Gobert game. His box score is off the charts, and shout out to him. I have not been the biggest proponent of some of his impact here and there, but like he has answered the call a few times. Like last year, really showed that with enough defensive help, he can slow down Jokic. And that was the big question for me last year. Like I just had never really seen him do it and didn't really think he would. But with the extra length of another 7-footer and Cat last year, he was able to do it. And then this year, I mean, I'm a little bit almost surprised at how well the Randall trade has worked out, and I've been a little hesitant of both of these trades just for a handful of reasons, mostly around defensive like versatility on the wing and maybe lack of 3-point spacing, feeling a little clunky with Randall and Gobert playing together, but it's really worked, and Randall has really been the player that's impressed me most this series for that team. Like we all know what Ant-Man brings. He's had this lights out 3-point shooting year, practically leading the league. I want to say in 3-point percentage and maybe volume or
I think
close.
just volume, but he was right around 40%, which is nonetheless
Right.
incredible feat.
Right. 40% on that league leading volume, just insane. And wasn't he in a shootout for the total volume with Malik Beasley down to the wire?
They both hit, I think, 6 or 7 on the final day. But
Yeah.
they obviously, how they play the East Coast games, or East Conference games, all at I think 1 p.m. I think Beasley hit 6 or 7, and then went on Twitter and had some fun and was like, "All right, Ant, you got
Right.
and then obviously Ant playing the Western Conference, was playing the Jazz, and they needed to win that game, and Ant was gunning for them to let him back in late, and I think he hit a 6th or 7th, and fun little wrinkle between the two. Obviously played together, I think, for a year and a half in Minnesota as well. So yeah, I think it was 320 for Anthony Edwards and 319 for Malik Beasley. So
There it is.
it's always fun when kind of races like that come down to literally the final quarter, final few minutes. It was a fun.
Yeah, it's like Shaq. Was it Shaq and David Robinson for the scoring title, something like that? Like,
was it Shaq? I know it was David Robinson, and David Robinson scored 70 on the final game or something like that. But it was something ridiculous that David Robinson did to secure the scoring crown, whatever the year it was, late 90s, I think. Maybe
yeah, April 24th, 94, David Robinson scored 71 points on the final day of the season to outscore Shaquille O'Neal for the scoring title. Just insane. And that's like 94 is practically, I mean, that's Magic Shaq right there. We're talking a legend. And so back to the T-Wolves here. Ant-Man, and also on the 3-point shooting. I mean, Anthony Edwards was 0 for 11 last night from 3-point range. There was a stretch for the Wolves where they missed 18 3-pointers in a row where Mike Conley, revival of Conley, hits a corner 3 and ends that. And they still won the game. That's an elimination game. You get an 0 of 11 3-point from your best scorer, and you still beat Luka and LeBron in an elimination game. And that kind of highlights Gobert and Randle, especially how great they were. I mean, Randle looks like a man possessed. Like he's trying defensively to a degree I haven't necessarily seen before. And he was once one of the league leaders in 3-point assists. I think his drive and kick ability is part of the reason Anthony Edwards has taken that leap as a 3-point volume shooter, is that instead of Karl Anthony Towns kind of spacing the floor as Ant initiates everything and does some drives and stuff too, you now have Julius Randle, who is constantly looking to get downhill and either score or create for others. And I think that dynamic has unlocked Ant a little bit off the ball, especially as a 3-point shooter, which leads to him getting more attempts. But, Randle was just the guy to me last night. Like he was attacking Luka Doncic. He was throwing behind the back handles. Like he was facing up, driving, hitting a tough shot floaters, drawing fouls, kicking out. He had foul trouble for the first half, and yet he had 8 points in the fourth and 20 points pretty late into the game. And that just shows like how intense he was when he was actually available for this team. And, shout out to Gobert as well. There was a great Kevin Harlan quote where Gobert flies in for an offensive rebound putback, and he says, Gobert parachutes in, uncovered, untouched, and jackhammers it home. And he's just, you got to love Kevin Harlan and those calls like that. He just makes every playoff game feel like more important.
Yeah, I would agree that Randall's been kind of the story of this Wolves turnaround. I think they were 32-29 when he came back on March 2nd against the Suns, and they're 21-5 since. Or I think they closed the year 49-33 and then 4-1 in the playoffs. So, and he's the catalyst behind it, I would say, in terms of the shift. Right? Obviously, Ant is their best player, and Gobert is pretty rock solid along with their cast of supporting players. But Randle is the shift that brought them from a team flirting around 500, trying to avoid the play-in, to now a team that has a very legit chance to make the Western Conference Finals, regardless of who they face between the Rockets and Warriors in round 2. He's, for the most part, I think at times he's still kind of fallen back into some old habits of forcing shots and playing on the ball too long, holding the ball. But on the whole, throughout this 2-month stretch, quick decisions, attacking off the rip, making good reads, collapsing the defense, crashing the glass when he doesn't have the ball, he's either cutting or he's screening, things like that. He kind of likes to do this thing when he gets off the ball, and if it passes to Ant, he'll immediately sprint into a screen for Ant to either maybe it's dribble handoff or short roll, things like that. The defensive intensity, I think, still ebbs and flows, but in this series, I think he did a really nice job on LeBron, just kind of cutting off drives, forcing him into tough stuff, kind of turning LeBron into a jump shooter, which granted LeBron has become a pretty nice shooter in the twilight stages of his career, but you still prefer LeBron to be kind of stationary and not attacking downhill and getting to the rim. And I think Randle did a really good job of forcing him into kind of less preferable options. And I think kind of, there's been some talk, I think in Wolves corners, reputable talk would say that like they did this Cat Randle trade to offer more flexibility with the new CBA, which I think is absolutely true. But I think on the court, they wanted a little more diversity of decision making, as with the secondary ball handler, because Cat, very good driver, but he's not much of a on the move passer when he drives. He's probably going to shoot the ball or be called for an offense foul with that chicken wing that kind of has plagued him throughout his career.
While screaming, "Oh my God!"
Yeah, something. Yeah, he's been the one who's wronged while he's got his arm wrapped around a defender's side. But obviously, on the whole, Cat a very good driver for a big man. Has been very good at this year, but just doesn't pass the ball very much. Because it's not within his game. I think he's very much like a biomechanically almost like a top heavy player, and so it's harder to stay sturdy and see that. I think Randall's got a lot more like kind of core sturdiness to him, and so when he drives, this can be a finish, a floater, a kick out, a lay down pass. There's a lot more there. And with Ant's kind of, with the way that a lot of teams send two to the ball, especially with Ant becoming, perhaps the best pull-up shooter in the league outside of Steph Curry this year, you're going to see a lot of blitzes. And so Randle being more capable of exploiting that in different ways than Cat, I think is kind of part of the appeal there as well. Now, it's tough to say that, I'm sure that Tim Connolly and company thought Ant would turn into a guy who demanded all these blitzes because of his shooting. But at the same time, he was already a pretty good shooter before this, and it's not like teams never blitzed Ant before this year. It was a pretty common occurrence. And so I think having a kind of a little more diverse relief valve than what they had previously, especially as Connolly's gotten older and had a bit of a down year as non-ball creator, remains a very good shooter, as we've mentioned, kind of snapped him out of that funk. But I've just been really, really impressed with Randle. And I say that as a guy who I wasn't a huge fan of. I recognize he was obviously a good player, but a flawed one. And I think he's been really, really impressive on the whole this year, and is kind of the key to them going from a team that, was fighting to win 42, 44 games to one that nearly won 50 and has been one of the best teams in the league. I would say, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I would imagine since the start of March, probably top 3 or 4 in win percentage, net rating when you include the playoffs. So he's kind of driving force behind that. I was very impressed and pleased for his sake that he continued that, beyond the regular season and the playoffs, because I think he's gotten a bit of an unfair shake at times in the playoffs. Was very bad in that 21 series against the Hawks, but was also in an unfit role with a supporting cast that is mostly filled with guys who are out of the league at this point. No disrespect to them, but I think it kind of shows kind of how far above their weight they're punching the Randle and Tibbs pulling the strings as a defense first team. And then, when he played in the playoffs 2 years ago, was kind of out of sorts with coming off the ankle injury, and some of that I think impacted decision making. So I was really happy to kind of see him shake off some of the playoff rust and the playoff foibles to have a really nice first round series. And he was the key, I thought, last night to kind of steadying the ship when it looked like things were kind of coming off the hinges. Right, Luka's finding his rhythm in the third quarter. The Wolves can't hit the broad side of the barn from deep. And then Ant starts the fourth quarter on the bench, and they just spam those kind of high post, mid post, elbow extended post ups for Randle against Reeves, Vincent, Luka, and he's making quick decisions. He's getting into the paint. He's spraying some kickouts. He's putting the ball up at the rim that even if he misses a kind of a tougher shot, Gobert's there with the size advantage to slam it home or get a foul on a putback or finish a putback. So I really thought he was the key to kind of steadying things and regaining momentum for the Wolves after it looked like they might, have just one of the worst shooting nights ever and blow a really awesome opportunity to close that game out in LA. So he was the man of the man of the day for me. But obviously Gobert, as mentioned, was great. Just really exploited the Lakers' refusal to play any sort of size / not have any trustworthy size inside. Just was capitalized on the Wolves or the Lakers being in rotation because they were throwing two at Ant. and then being a step slow on those rotations back behind the double team. So Randle was the driving force, but you'd be remiss if you didn't mention Gobert for the way he exploited the strategy and the lineups the Lakers opted to employ in Game 5.
Yeah, I mean, a ton of great points there. I mean, Gobert had 27 points, 24 rebounds. I mean, 24 rebounds in a playoff game. I mean, like he very much like showed up as that star level player that, you know, if you have a clear advantage that you have the big man advantage, you just got to go out and do it. And whether it's just playing tougher or bringing that energy, like, you have the size advantage, that's like what you do best. Like it's time to show up, and he did it. Like you gotta credit Gobert for showing up. He was everywhere, protecting the rim, making life hard for the Lakers around the rim. And then that size advantage and athletic advantage, like he just dominated the glass. And, that is something that gives him some offensive impact that he doesn't always have, where he around the rim, he can be a strong clay finisher at the very least. So you can do that without shooting a mid-range jump shot and still get a 2020 game. So got to shout out Gobert there. But yeah, I'm with you that like Randle is that driving force this especially this series. And right when you mentioned Steph and Ant's ability to pull up, that only Steph is better, it just made me think of that, the way Steph and Draymond kind of run their pick and roll, where when Steph gets blitzed or trapped or something, he's dumping it to Draymond, and then you have a 4-on-3, and you have a smart playmaker who can make a lot of different passes and reads out of that. And that's kind of an Ant Randall dynamic there, where compared to maybe, like you said, with Cat, where he's focused on scoring, you go 4-on-3 with Randall. Now you have someone that can score or initiate or create for others and keep the ball moving and make a good decision with the ball to, to find the best shot for the team. So, I do think that Randall's playmaking has been just arguably, the one of the more reliable kind of creator options and playmaking options for this team, and it's just been a huge boost. And the Lakers go out. I mean, I haven't even mentioned Jaden McDaniels yet. Like he's had some big games. Like I think he's known for a defensive reputation, but he's I want to say had a 27-point game in Game 3, maybe it was, but
30 in Game 3, I think, right? 30 and then like 18 in Game 4.
Yeah, so there you go. It for someone known as like a defender, it's cool to see how dynamic he can be at his best, and really give the offense another option there, where they're just that much tougher to guard when you have another guy that can go get his own buckets, and just really good driver and kind of a dynamic mover with his footwork and just the way he's almost elusive off the ball and on the ball, moving around. So had to give him a shout. And also big Ragu Dante DiVincenzo, nice Game 3 in my opinion, at the very least. He was making a lot of good passes, good reads, keeping the ball moving, and I think he's looked good at times in this series too so far.
Yeah, I thought in general what the Wolves did really well offensively, despite not having a great overall kind of offensive series, was just moved off the ball well. Whether it's clearing a wing to give Ant an easier driving lane, flash in middle, baseline cuts, keeping the ball moving, just really, really well connected there. And I think that's kind of something that Randle and DiVincenzo have helped with a lot. I think, the 2 years of the Cat Gobert era, I thought there was a tendency for the ball to get stuck a lot. Especially year one, it's to an extent in year two, but the defense was good enough for that to not matter more often than not. And I think DiVincenzo and Randle really kind of helped alleviate that to an extent. And just with their off-ball movement and their connective passing, I was really impressed with that. And with Gobert too, we mentioned the offense, but the defense was phenomenal all series. And I think the fact that his offense and his play finishing were much more efficient in game 5, it allowed them to play him 39 minutes, whereas the other games he was playing 24, 25, 26 because he wasn't getting rebounds and he couldn't finish around the hoop because he's so inflexible and also has terrible touch for the most part, but was just a lot better in that department. And I think the Wolves prefer to play Gobert more minutes, but they recognize they have a secondary front court option with Reed and Randle out there. And it was crucial for Gobert to play really well in Game 5 because Naz Reid has the worst game of the series, right? I think he had some nice plays defensively. I think blocked Luka, met LeBron at the rim, but 1 of 4 from the field, only 4 points, first time all series, not in double digits. Excuse me. so to get your starting center to kind of be able to actually play those starting caliber minutes and do so in dominant fashion was huge. But yeah, Jaden, I was really impressed with all series. I don't know for certain, but it felt like to me after game one, the mandate after he had a really nice game one was to run him and a lot of those other guys off the arc, which I wasn't the adjustment I would have made given Jaden McDaniels was a 30% three-point shooter this year. But I thought he did really well to be after game. I think he struggled with that in game two when he had a really quiet game. I think he struggled to kind of adapt to how hard and aggressively they were running him off the arc. But games 3, 4, and somewhat 5, he didn't play as much, had some foul trouble, obviously fouled out. Games 4 and 5 especially, I thought he was really quick and aggressive off the catch, knowing that they're going to run him off the arc and there was going to be space inside because the Lakers are playing small. And I think he said it after game one that, like, when they go small, I'm the tallest guy on the court for their team, especially with the length that he has. He's got, I think, over a 7-foot wingspan and has the high release point. So I thought he adapted really well to that. Even in game 1, too, when he hit a couple of threes and they started playing him more aggressively. But games 3 and 4, I was very impressed with that. And so I think it was just a very well-rounded series. Obviously, Ant had his clutch, his heroics in games 3 and 4 and was sensational in games 3 and 4 overall. But I think, there were times, Nas Reed, Jaden McDaniels, were huge. Gobert was huge. Randle had some nice games. But I was impressed that it didn't feel like DiVincenzo and Nickeil Alexander-Walker had particularly strong series. I think the defense is generally always there for those two. They're really nice complementary wings, but you also like kind of what they provide as off-ball options offensively. And you didn't get any, like, there wasn't a game that we were like, oh, it's the DiVincenzo game or the Nickeil Alexander-Walker game. So, and those guys are pretty important to the elite depth that the Timberwolves have. So I was impressed with how kind of relatively easily they dispatched the Lakers. Obviously, the games are close, but I think when you win a game in a series in 5, you can say relatively easily. But yeah, to me, it was Randle and Gobert leading the way. But I also thought Ant made a lot of nice reads as a passer. There are a lot of simple reads in that game 5. The Lakers double teams kind of felt half-hearted almost at times and not really complicating the decisions Ant had to make off of them. I think that stems from not providing a ton of pressure on the ball because you were worried about the lack of size behind you, and the lack of size already behind you was not particularly sharp on its backside rotations anyways. And so it was pretty easy for Ant to pick out who he wanted to get the ball. They were pretty consistently just flashing a wing or a guard at the free throw line and then letting them make decisions for an open three. Somewhat fortunately, to Lakers credit, or not credit, to their benefit, the Wolves missed a bajillion open threes to make that game a lot closer than maybe the scoreline suggested. But at the same time, they were also 29 of 42 on 2-pointers, which is nearly 70%. So I don't think that completely offsets the 7 for 47, but when you're shooting that well inside the arc, and I think it was like 90% at the rim, they were 20 of 22. I was looking at cleaning the glass today. 20 of 22 at the rim, it helps offset to a degree when you're shooting horrendously from 3. And I think that mostly stemmed from the Lakers being really poor with their backside rotations and Redick's unwillingness to play any interior size, which, you can criticize him for to an extent, but at the same time, his hands were kind of tied. Hayes was not particularly useful in the series, but I probably would have gone to him a little more just to kind of change up your look a little bit and see how the Wolves respond and see how he responded. But I also understand why he didn't, but I think it's understandable to criticize him, but not to go too far with it, because I think people still don't quite grasp like how much his hands are tied behind his back when you have 5.4 playable guys. I mean, they played Vanderbilt for a longer stretch in game 4, and they couldn't score for shit because he offers nothing as a spacer or a roller or a finisher. And you just play 4 on 5. When Gobert's on the floor, you just tilt everything away from him and rotate back, which is where I thought Gobert was really nice as well. In addition to rim protection, he was really lively and helped running guys off the arc, deterring shots outside of the paint as well. Had an incredible block in transition where he hustled down. I can't remember who it was on, but kind of sprinted all the way down and made a play. So kind of all over the place there with my thoughts on it, but just kind of tying everything in there where I can understand the need or preference for more size and maybe some of the criticisms of Redick, but also realizing the Lakers had pretty poor depth and were working with kind of a makeshift roster after trading their all NBA caliber, right. Which for a trade that everyone should and would do, but it doesn't make it any easier to adjust on the fly when you don't have a guy who can play the five credibly for 35 minutes a night or 30 minutes a night.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like the coaches kind of have to play with use the roster they have, and they on the fly make a mid-season trade. They weren't one of the best defensive teams to start with, and that they lose their All NBA DPOY level defender type guy for an offensive MVP, and don't really replace the big man aspect of all that. So Maxi Kleber made his Lakers debut last night because they were just grabbing for straws, like trying to try something to mix it up. And I
that
don't
felt cruel. Did JJ and Maxey have beef when they were teammates on the Mavs? He'd thrown them in there for the first time in 3.5 months, and
I think it was Harlan was announcing. He's like, well, Kleber makes an entrance and he's never played. He's never even practiced with this team before. Let's see how this goes. Like
and it did not go well. He missed a three short or long or off, and then stepped out of bounds. Another corner catch. It was understandable that he was rusty, but yeah, there's got jokingly, but obviously there's maybe Kleber kicked his ass in cards all the time on the team playing to get him back for that.
Throw him in there. And yeah, I mean, they just aren't a defensive team. And I think that, the offense, you have two of the greatest offensive superstars to ever play, two of the greatest cerebral basketball minds, scorers, shooters, like instant chemistry. You expect that. But like if you don't have a defense, it's going to be really hard to play playoff basketball for an entire series. Like I don't think we've, other than maybe Shaq and Kobe, like there hasn't been many times, definitely not in the past since then, where a team only is top 12 on one end, but is not top 12 on the other and actually wins it all. So, it's kind of funny that, like, who would have thought that the Jimmy Butler trade might have more of an in-season impact towards a contender than a Luka Doncic trade in the same season. And, long term, obviously it's Luka. You do the deal, but there's normally when you make a big in-season trade, it's not going to result in a championship. It rarely ever does. And, Jimmy's been a huge impact guy for the Golden State right away because they have that system and identity in place, and they still have Steph and Dre and that defensive depth that kind of already made them a pseudo contender. But when you throw another star on there, it's really dynamic, hard to guard, multiple different star scores, and that type of dynamic with the gravity that Steph brings off the ball and from deep, and then Jimmy's kind of downhill force gravity as well. I just thought that was a natural pairing, and then they don't lose any of their defense and depth really that really mattered. They, if anything, they upgraded it and still kept that identity, whereas the Lakers just started from scratch almost like with a whole new identity and two of the greatest scorers, a really smart coach as well. And JJ, give a credit to him, but it's hard, like you say, it's hard to basically go 4-on-5 or just not really have the depth or defense to hang at this point. But I still don't think many people thought that they would only win one playoff game necessarily.
Yeah,
and
I
already be out.
I thought the Lakers were getting certainly overrated a little bit, or maybe less so that I thought the rest of the West was on the Lakers and Warriors caliber besides the Thunder. I would say 2 through 7 were all kind of in a jumbled mix that I thought unsurprisingly, the big market teams were getting kind of the risen to the cream of the crop. Not to say they weren't good, but I had Wolves in 7. I did not expect it to be in 5. But at the same time, the Wolves, I think, the Lakers had the highest wins above expected on cleaning the glass because of their clutch time ability, which granted, when you have Luka and LeBron, maybe you're going to be a little better there. And the Wolves were like 27th to 28th in wins over expected. And the Wolves were 5th in net rating this year, and the Lakers were like 12th or 13th, and their numbers were not incredible post-Luka trade. Some of that was LeBron missing some time, but the regression to the mean kind of hit for both teams there, where the team that had struggled in the clutch all year ended up dominating a few games, and the team that had been playing over its head a little bit all year ended up missing some shots. So I wasn't super surprised about the Wolves winning the series, but I did expect it to go at least 6 or 7. Or I should say 6. I mean, 7's the maximum you could go in a series. But yeah, I did think kind of that the Butler trade have a bigger impact than the Doncic trade, not because Butler's a better player, but because of the difference in what they gave up and how that reshaped the team, which is what you're alluding to, right? Like when you give up Wiggins, and I think of Wiggins, Kyle Anderson in a pick versus Max Christie, Anthony Davis in a first rounder, you lose a lot more kind of your identity and talent on the Lakers side of things. So I was not surprised that it seems as though Golden State's reaped more benefit from the trade for an All NBA guy, just kind of given the acquisition, the immediate fit of what it provided. But yeah, it's just so hard to like we're talking about the defense, and yes, their defense was not particularly good. Lakers defense was not particularly good in this series, but their issue was not half court defense. The Lakers had a better half court offensive rating in the series than the Timberwolves. The issue was that the Timberwolves scored, I think, almost 1.5 points per possession in transition, and scored 1 point per possession in transition. And I think that's because they just didn't have the size or the horses or the athleticism to stop the fresher, bigger, longer, more athletic Wolves in transition, and they weren't exactly lighting it up in the half court, and so there's still a lot of misses to ignite the transition game, and that hurt them. But offensively, like when you don't have a big man that can kind of, you think about space in the floor. We always think about like space in the floor to get opening driving lanes and opening and kind of having those shooters around you. If you don't have an interior force that plays off the ball that can kind of suck the defense in as a play finisher or pick and roll threat, it's going to be hard to craft really good offense. And the Wolves going pretty switch heavy in this series, even with Gobert, they blitzed Luka at times, but mostly switching things and being able to just play single coverage and not send a lot of help to Luka to open up the skip pass, the kickouts, because they didn't have to worry about a lob threat or worry about a pick and roll threat and tilting the defense that way, made them a pretty stagnant offense. And I saw some hand-wringing about, why isn't JJ doing more offensively? And it's like, well, and again, maybe I'm coming off as too much of a JJ supporter. I don't think he had a great series, but I think the focus on him as the main culprit, is overshadowing the flawed roster and kind of what that brought about and limitations it spurred on. But if you don't, like, switching is designed to stall offense. It's designed to keep the ball in front of you and play single coverage for the most part and not let the offense get you in rotation. And that's what the Wolves did, because they have the defensive personnel and the Lakers didn't have the offensive personnel to get them out of switching. And you can only run so much stuff against switching defense that's really going to bend that defense. You want to run an off-ball flare or a pin in, or you want to run a pin down, or things like that. We're just going to switch that. We're going to top block it because we don't care about one of the guys in the court half the time, or you don't have the size to really bend us and beat us. So I thought the offense to me was more disappointing. Even if the Lakers' defensive numbers were not great in the whole, it was their inability to get stops in transition that was an issue, because they didn't have any size, and they couldn't run at themselves in transition because they were having to flood, the paint to get rebounds because they didn't have any size to rebound the ball against Gobert and Nasri and Julius Randle, Anthony Edwards and Jaden McDaniels. When you send four guys to the paint to get a defensive rebound, and the Wolves can just send four guys back, you're not going to make anything happen. It's just simple, like, geometry of the floor. So I think that has to be point one above all else, is figuring out a way to get a starting caliber center for the Lakers. And I think if they do that, you will see a much more dynamic team on both ends, because it was just so evident throughout that series. And that was my biggest hesitancy with them, even entering the playoffs. I thought they could win a series. I wouldn't have been surprised they beat the Wolves. But when you just don't have different ways to play, you back yourself into a corner. And the way the Lakers wanted to play did not match up well against the team they were playing in the first round. And so you're kind of SOL. And they were SOL to the tune of a 5-game defeat.
Right. And especially when you're pretty much just relying on Luka and LeBron to run ISO over and over and be superstars, like you're saying. Like, it's just not they're tough, obviously tough individuals to guard, but it's not confusing the defenses if you're just running the same thing over and over without any much off-ball movement and all that. And they have shooters, Rui Hachimura kept them in it for a little bit, hit like 5 threes, has shot the lights out this whole season, or series, I should say. And I've liked some of his a little bit of two-way impact, like it brings a little bit defensively and then as a scorer and shooter, like he's a piece. But they generally have a lot of offensive firepower around them just from shooters, and not enough dynamic, like you're saying. Like, Luka is almost like Harden back in Houston. Like, he can really be unlocked with a pick and roll lob threat, and can add another vertical gravity type of option for that offense that he just doesn't have here. And that, to the point about Jackson Hayes, like, that is kind of what he can bring to the table, if nothing else. So it's interesting he didn't really go to that well. But if you're not getting much impact from him, then You're just trying anything and trying to survive and not sink
Well, and I
that
would
way.
say the issue with Hayes too is that like I think a lot of times we think about the ball handler dictating what pick and roll coverage a team runs, whether they can shoot, whether you want to go under, whether you want to drop, to have a float game. But a lot of times it's the big man as well, because when Hayes is out there, you can still switch everything because he's not going to punish a smaller guy. And the Lakers and the Wolves also don't have very many smaller guys. Like, who are you going to, because you're not, Mike Conley's not in the action. Mike Conley also was a very, impressive defender in this series, despite his diminutive and older stature. You're going to post up Jackson Hayes with Anthony Edwards, with Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, Naz Reid. No, of course not. And if you are, he's not enough of an offensive threat that you can still scram that on the backside, right? So even if you set a screen, which they did at times, they ran some Jackson Hayes pick and rolls, in the 12 minutes he got in the series. You just switch that action because you're not worried about it. So you keep the ball in front. Luka doesn't get downhill. The defense isn't in rotation. So you need a big man who can, at the very least, punish a team on the glass, like a Gobert did in this series, or in this game, I should say. I think he nearly doubled his total rebounds for the series in Game 5. I think 49. So you need a guy who can either punish you on the glass or has a little bit of a post game at least. And Jackson Hayes can't do either because as great of a vertical athlete as he is, he's not very strong, so he's not going to push a guy out of the way. So they're going to get into a center of gravity and push him off the spots for offensive rebounds. He's not going to post him up, And if he does post up, like, that's a great win for the defense if you're taking away touches from Luka and LeBron. So I can understand why you didn't really go Jackson Hayes, because I don't think as much as he is a lob threat, he isn't going to present that lob threat because of his other limitations offensively. So just a tough space to be. And I think you just need some sort of legitimate scoring threat as a starting center, in the offseason for the Lakers. And that really was the defining, theme of their demise in this series.
And to their credit, they tried to make that happen this year with the Mark Williams trade, and it just didn't work out for whatever injury related thing. Whoever decided to back out of it, I think it was the Lakers saying they didn't like the medical part of the trade, so they kind of reneged on it after and the problem was it was after the trade deadline. If it had happened a week earlier, maybe they can go trade for, I don't know, Clint Capella or just some rim roller that was somewhat available, just to have a body that could do these things to some degree. And they just were unable to do it. A little surprised they didn't go out and sign some veteran. I guess
Dwight Howard, but I think that proves that the guys who are available on the buyout market or in free agency are not guys you're going to trust. But I will say too that the Wolves are a specifically tough matchup because they have the range with their low men, the Jaden McDaniels, the Julius Randles, to kind of toggle between, sinking inside on the backside and, recovering back to the corner against shooters. And Luka's obviously probably the best skip passer in the league. That a lot of teams don't have that range. So, maybe they play a lesser, less rangy defensive team, less team with size, and maybe they're still alive, or maybe they're even in the second round. But that kind of, that goes back to my point that I just don't think they were well built to handle a lot of different matchups. And so I would have been surprised if they won more than one series, barring health on both sides. So that's kind of the big thing there, is getting a legit center, but also recognize that, it's not all lost because they played a team that is really well designed to beat them, and a team that is built to play different looks. Like we said, their 4-time defensive player of the year center, was not, integral to their success throughout the series at times. And they still, he was obviously great defensively all series, like I said, but was a pretty big liability on offense, and it didn't really matter because they had different looks they could throw out there that the Lakers could not. So just trying to get more versatile, which is, what every team's trying to do that has an early exit or doesn't make the playoffs altogether. But I think that was really, really tough for them to navigate. And who knows? As good as I think Luka was still quite good as a Laker this year, and clearly was his worst year in a while, whether it's because of the injuries or whatever it is. You got to hope that he gets back to kind of the form we saw last year and the couple years prior, because I think he was definitely a step behind that, even if he's still quite good. And some of the worries are getting overblown about him. I think that, you would expect he gets better, but at the same time, you do have LeBron, and he'll be 41 by midseason next year. So it's not a great place to be. They're not exactly flush with talent beyond LeBron, aside from Austin Reeves and a couple other role players. You mentioned Rui Hachimura has blossomed a really nice player for them since coming over from the Wizards a few years ago. So, yeah, I think that would be the hope is that Luka is back to his really, really incredible ways, more than just the very good player I think we saw most of his Lakers tenure and even his time with the Mavs earlier this season.
Yeah, and it's like we kind of hit on. It's a lot to expect, like a big midseason overhaul like that to just suddenly contend. And because of the Lakers, they have LeBron and Luka. I think that adds to it the expectations of immediate success. Where, like, obviously this is a long-term play. You bring in Luka Doncic, one of the greatest scoring creators ever in his prime. Your offense is probably set for the next 10 years, unless he wasn't very committal in those exit interviews about an extension. So that's a big wild card in all this as well. But I do also think that from the LeBron side that it kind of could help him age gracefully as this like big power forward playmaker type, as more of an off-ball finisher, the way that Luka has unlocked LeBron back in the transition game too, as just a wide receiver almost to Luka's quarterback, where like LeBron's quote was like he hasn't played with an outlet passer like this since Kevin Love. So, LeBron is able to kind of take advantage of his athletic gifts without necessarily having to create everything as a scorer. He can just be this like Karl Malone-esque rim roller four next to Luka for the foreseeable future. And I actually think that could even extend LeBron's career a little bit if he wants it to, where he can kind of slowly, like ships in the night, just kind of like give more of the ball to Luka and become more of that play finisher type. So I do think a little more chemistry, the offseason of that pairing, and then obviously, as you speak on the depth and finding that floor balance with a center who can protect the rim and rebound and play finish, rim roll, bring that, ideally a pick and pop as well. Like I did like what Kleber did with Luka back in the day. It's just it's been about 2 or 3 years since all that, so we got to see if he can return to form.
You just never know with Kleber at this point. Unfortunately, it seems like he's always one move away from an injury. It's fun and good as he was as a role player. It's tough, but
right.
Yeah.
I'm glad you shouted out Naz Reid too. Sorry to interrupt, but Naz has been incredible. I think he earned himself a good paycheck this summer as a free agent. Like he's been, a really skilled center that's more than just an energy guy.
Yeah, I was surprised at how well he held up on switches against Luka and LeBron at times in this series. There were a few times where LeBron just kind of said, "I'm bigger and stronger than you," or "I'm stronger than you." I don't know if he's bigger, but put my head down. But I was impressed with his mobility there. But yeah, and then how's Austin Reeves respond? He's kind of just now entering his prime. I think he's 26 or 27. Has gotten better every year. Definitely took a sizable leap forward this year as a creator and kind of pull up three shooter in terms of aggression. I don't know if the numbers ever ended up flat. I think at one point he had really nice numbers. I don't know where they ended up, but was certainly more aggressive this year as a pull-up guy, better passer. I did think he got stronger to become a better defender when teams hunt him. How does he respond to a tough series where it seemed like Minnesota's length, athleticism kind of took away some of his clean looks as a paint scorer and pull-up shooter and whatnot? So how does he respond? Can he kind of help also take some of the load off LeBron and kind of be just more of this cutter, roller, playmaker, rebounder guy over the next few years? So that's kind of I'm curious about. Reeves is a guy whose game I really enjoy, and it's been really fun to watch him blossom in the last few years, especially this season. But he had a poor series, so how do you respond from that? But at the same time, he generally has a pretty nice playoff track record his first couple of years, so I don't think it means anything super cause for concern. But you just want to see how a guy responds to that. His first really, really kind of poor playoff showing. But even then, I don't think he was so terrible. Like I don't think he was atrocious. I think. And I don't want to necessarily for this just comes to mind. Jalen Williams really struggled last year offensively against the Mavs. I don't think it was to that level for Reeves. I don't think he was that poor offensively. Granted, J-Dub was quite good defensively, but point being is I think that some of it was overblown because the Lakers are struggling. It's easy to just point at the culprits you can see, right? Redick, Luka, LeBron, Reeves, whereas the real culprit is the lack of a center and ability to play different styles. It's natural, but it's much easier to analyze the things that you can see that aren't going right or are going right versus the things that aren't happening out there. And so I think that's a lot of what is happening with some of the Lakers post-mortem analysis, or even while their demise was happening. So, which is not even a criticism, it's just kind of adding some nuance and layers to it that, like I keep harping on, their biggest issue was they didn't have anyone they could trust who was over 6'10" that could offer them a nice presence on both ends and make life easier for their best players and make life harder for the team they were facing.
Right. It is hard as a lot of teams kind of return to two big lineups to try to just win with small ball and to outscore you with ISOs. And yeah, I wasn't like blown away or really disappointed by Reeves either. I thought he was okay. Like he hit some shots, like he hit some threes, pull up threes, some catch and shoot threes. Like I'm not really worried about the offense with LeBron, Luka, Reeves, big three, and JJ at the helm calling plays and their supplementary shooters other than everything we just talked about, that the extra, like just being a little more versatile, a little more unpredictable, having more options as an offense, especially with a big man that can just be relied on either as a rim roller, a pick and pop threat, mid-range post up threat, just something where you get something from a big man. Because like if you're trying to basically hand over a mismatch to the opponent, like you really have to be special at whatever you're doing to just play without a good center. Like this is basketball where height is still pretty important. It probably the most important thing a player, an individual player, can bring before we branch out to all the other skills. So
I would just note that I would say the question that I think most confronts the Lakers this summer, at least offensively, is how do we get a player who can stress the defense on the interior as an off-ball threat? And the answer most likely is going to come in the form of a center because they do need some more traditional rim protection. But that's the biggest thing they're lacking because I just felt like even when I watched Lakers in the regular season at times, they weren't getting so much. The defense didn't feel like it was in rotation as much as you would like for a team with Luka and LeBron. It felt like a lot of kind of, we're so great, we're going to make it happen. And maybe Reeves going to attack off the catch or do his thing. So how do you stress the defense to get them to shift in, let Luka hit the kickouts, the laydowns, the lobs? Because I definitely think his playmaking impact was muted since joining the Lakers, and finding a way to better unlock that for him and everyone around him will take the offense to the heights that I think everyone expects them to reach as they get more comfortable and kind of fill out this roster and the vision of Luka leading things rather than, now all of a sudden we have Luka. How do we do this in 3 months and gear up for a deep run? So it's a tough challenge, but now, they have time to answer the questions, but earlier than I think everyone in the organization was hoping they would have time to answer those questions.
Not wrong there. And yeah, I mean, and they're the Lakers. They have Luka. Like they're going to have players that are interested in playing with them, and it's just about kind of targeting the right type of player, as you say, a play finisher, someone in the dunker spot, just more versatility to that offense. And a key point, unlocking one of the best passers ever in Luka and all the things he can do, instead of just forcing him to be a tough shot maker every single time down as an ISO threat, which he can do pretty consistently, but you're just not getting the most out of Luka that you possibly could. And you could have a one-man offense if you surround him with play finishers, because he's one of the best creators the game has seen. And shout out Anthony Edwards as well before we wrap here. 43 points in game 4, and not the best game 5, but to the T-Wolves' credit, that depth was enough where he could have an off night, and Gobert steps up that night. And as you mentioned, Gobert is not having the best series, but they have the Naz Reid option they can throw out there, and that's been seemingly, to the eye test, almost like at the very least another dynamic wrinkle with next to Randle that is a very serviceable option. I wouldn't go as far to say it's better than the starting option, or else he would be starting, but it's just a more offensive type of option at the very least, where you kind of can go either way with the defense or offense and have those options. So that it speaks to the depth that they could kind of go through the series, different players stepping up throughout the series and still essentially dominating the entire series. I mean, like, maybe there was obviously the Lakers won one of the games, and they were close in another, but you got to pull it out, and they didn't quite do it. Anthony Edwards ends up averaging, I just had it in front of me, but he's scored over 20 in 4 of the 5 games, and like he looks like the rising star and one of the faces of the league, and it's kind of cool to see the ascension of, he took out LeBron and Luka in round 1, when I would say most people did not necessarily expect him to do that. You did in games with the game 7 prediction, but so shout out Ant. He's one of the most exciting players out here, and it's kind of cool to see the success match that swagger at times, and see how far he can go and continue to add to his growing legacy as one of the rising stars in this league.
Yeah, I want to say with Ant, he's a guy that I thought I was always maybe a little lower on than maybe the hype suggests since he burst onto the scene a couple of years ago as like a true star/superstar. And this series to me, I kind of felt like after game 4, I was like, okay, like I think I feel more in line with everyone else. I see the vision now. I was just so, even with the game 5 poor game, I was just so impressed with his approach, his diversity of approach, like his balancing of making the right reads, his balancing of getting downhill, tossing in the pull-up threes. Like I think his rim frequency was a lot higher in this series because nobody in the Lakers could stay in front of him. Was really terrible finishing the rim this series. So were the Wolves aside from game 4, which is kind of funny. But just kind of his ability to get downhill, pressure the defense, not get himself in the tough spots, make some complex kick-out reads, some skip passes, his intensity, applying pressure and physicality at the point of attack defensively, his stamina. You think about he was playing about the same minutes load as LeBron and Luka, and it's not fair to LeBron to compare them. They got nearly 2 decades of difference in age and a lot less tread on Ant's tires. But even Luka, is coming off a couple injuries, but still, like in crunch time in games 3 and 4, Ant was kicking LeBron and Luka's ass, and he was more better conditioned, at least in those moments, playing huge minutes. Thought he was even pretty solid off the ball defensively when asked to do things, fight around screens, rotate, rebound at times. His turnover numbers were pretty low, as despite the Lakers blitzing him in ball screens and ISO pretty often, and whatnot. And so just really impressive. Kind of, it felt like the culmination of everything that he's shown he can do at times throughout his career, and has often done mostly this year. Is a strong can to maybe make an first team All NBA. He'll make, I think, second team at worst this year, and that'll be deserved. But to me, that like this series, I was like, okay, I get. Like I always thought he was like a borderline, top 10, 12 guy the last couple of years, or at least last year, and then this year as well. But this one to me was where I was like, okay, like I think I completely get where he's just fine tuned enough of everything in his game to where I'm like, yeah, I see why people are so high on him. And that's not to say that I couldn't quite see it, but to me, just like it was the inflection point where I'm like, okay, like yeah, he is here, and I just think kind of the different ways he impacted the game and the way he approached it so maturely and patiently was very impressive. And I look forward to seeing whatever tough defense he faces next, because it's either going to be the Warriors, who I think are like first in defensive ratings since trading for Jimmy Butler, or the Rockets, who are like third on the year. And if they get past either of those teams, they're going to face the Thunder probably in the and if not, then maybe it's somehow the Clippers or the Nuggets, and the Clippers obviously have a good defense as we chronicled. So I look forward to seeing how he faces some stiffer tests defensively. But I think the approach he brought in this first round series bodes quite well, despite ultimately the shooting numbers not being great. I still think he was just the defining star of this series, and one that involved Luka, who, like I said, despite kind of a down year, is still very good, and LeBron, despite a lot of wear and tear on his tires, is still a All NBA caliber guy. So just really, really impressed with everything Ant brought. And I didn't even have to do a ton with the shot making. I just felt like it was the way he approached the game on both ends, and kind of the way he was always ready for the big moments. At the very least, ready to try and make something good happen in the big moments, because I don't think the quality of shot that Luka and LeBron got at times in crunch time was particularly good, because they were worn down, whereas Ant kind of always felt like he was ready for a explosive drive to the rim to tilt the defense or finish or take a pull-up three where he's comfortable. So just really, really impressed with Anthony Edwards and the way that he played in this series, even though it didn't happen to be one of his most explosive, efficient series as a scorer, where he's had a few of those. He's had some really, really impressive, efficient, high-volume scoring series. That wasn't the case here, but to me, I kind of felt most impressed with kind of everything he did and the way he impacted the game on both ends, playing 41, 42, 43 minutes a night every game of this series.
Yeah, Anthony Edwards, his decision making and his development is just really impressive, and continues to get better. Like he's developed his handle, developed his passing reads. I think one thing that like held him from reaching that upper echelon, like superstar status that you're talking about, is the decision making was erratic at times, and the 3-point shooting wasn't necessarily as efficient. as it is now, where it makes more sense that he's pulling up and hitting like that, and it's everything. It's the passing that you're hitting on. It's developing the handle, maybe the game slowing down for him as he enters his prime, because we might forget he's only in year 5. He's only 23 years old. He's arguably the most explosive, especially on ball athlete in the league today. His ability to get downhill, and he's just one of the most exciting players, where like there's a play in game 3 where he someone else gets the rebound and he just reaches in and grabs it. He brings the ball out to the 3-point line like he's playing make it take it, and then he just drives back in for like a baseline monster 2-hand slam, and it's like,
oh yeah, I remember, yeah,
yeah.
that one got me out of my seat watching it back on replay. It felt like he was, I mean, even for his standards, it felt like he had pogo sticks in his shoes. But yeah, but I'm really excited to see how he fares in the next round, because like I said, he's gonna face a top 5 defense. One
in the finals too.
Yeah,
It'll probably be Cavs or Celtics.
Yeah, and if he gets the Western Conference Finals, he would probably face the Thunder's defense, which is really handsy as well. But round 2 is going to face a team with a bunch of great athletes that like to be handsy in the Rockets, or he's going to face a defense that likes to play the passing lanes with Brandon Podziemski, Jimmy Butler. Draymond's always lurking in help, and so I think how he kind of navigates those touches inside the arc, which were generally pretty clean and comfortable for him in this series. Despite struggling to shoot at the rim, which is really weird because I thought he got a lot of good looks. How he handles that will be really interesting. I think that's kind of going to be really key. Not to do some kind of trying to do a series preview of a series we don't know yet, but I'm really fascinated to see how he handles that, because the Lakers defense certainly does not provide the same level of quandaries that the Warriors or Rockets will, for numerous reasons. It's the personnel. He's going to be facing maybe a Steve Kerr-led defense that has been there, done that plenty of times. Even Ime Udoka, I think, has a lot more creativity at his disposal because of the personnel. I don't know if he's necessarily a more creative coach than Redick, but just has more options, which leads to more creativity. It's like when you got more food in the fridge, you can cook more things. You better cook. I say this because I'm thinking about lunch already, but
oh yeah,
not even at 2:30. But yeah, so I'm really fascinated to kind of see how he handles that next one, and maybe the 3-point shot comes back. It was pretty high up before his 0 for 11 or 12 performance in Game 5, but he is a nuclear enough of a shooter that maybe he struggles inside the arc and just decides, I'm going to shoot 50% on 12 attempts a game, and it doesn't matter because I can do that for 5 or 6 games because I'm good enough at it. So, yeah, I'm really excited to kind of keep watching him, and I think he's someone who kind of fully converted me to be an entire believer to an extent that I maybe was hesitant previously, which is on me. I'm not trying to make this about me; it's about Ant. But I think it just as a guy who always thought he'd be really good, I didn't know if he could reach this level, and I think he's getting there. And I'm really curious to kind of see if he can sustain it and kind of how that shifts, in how he shifts his approach against a different defense and a better defense around too.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was similarly hesitant to see like clearly he had certain traits that could end up there, but I don't think he was clearly there at that top level quite yet. And he's so young and so explosive that and the development is leading there, where like the rate of development for a player of his athleticism and skill is just super impressive, and you can just see the focus and the decision making get better and better each year, and now maybe maybe he's also got one of the best supporting casts he's had this whole run as well, where we've hit on all the different ways where Randle unlocks some of his shooting, and the depth behind them, providing just good ancillary options to keep the ball moving and just find the open man. I think all those things come into play. But yeah, man, Ant-Man is one of the faces of the league, and he's absolutely on the rise in that sense. And I speaking hypotheticals, give me Jimmy Butler and Anthony Edwards going at each other for a playoff series and just talking smack the whole time like that.
Get Nas in there and Julius Randle,
Draymond. I mean, come on, we got some
trash talkers. We got some fun trash talking going on.
That's what we need.
But I hope selfishly we get a Game 7 of this Warriors Rockets series. So maybe we can wait a few more days until that's solidified. But
hey, I'll always take more basketball, man. Yeah, always take more playoff basketball.
Yeah, I'm really, as someone who's been watching Ant since he was, playing at Holy Spirit and in high school, and clearly the physical talent was there, but basically everything else was not there. It's been really impressive to see where he's come in half a decade, and I shouldn't say everything else wasn't there, but clearly lacked a lot of refinement of skill and was not a very good shooter, and the motor ebbed and flowed. So maybe everything else wasn't there.
I mean, it's kind of like a defensive back athlete playing like the stereotypical football player playing basketball, except he's actually gotten a lot better. Whereas a lot of the football players just kind of
So it's been a joy to watch, and it's fun to watch on a Wolves team that is making some serious headway.
They just use that athleticism, man. There it is. Well, yeah, can't wait to see Ant's ascension and the rest of this playoff series. We got to see how Rockets Warriors plays out. Nuggets Clippers tonight as well. And first round series that are close. I mean, come on, that's great. The second round is right around the corner. That's where things really start getting nitty gritty. And once we hit on like 2 playoff games a night, it's I don't know if the viewing experience gets better. You could just focus in. Everyone's paying attention.
I'm not worried about watching two games at once and trying to do it on my computer and my TV. And I can just walk in. I got game at 7:30, game at 10, and that's it. But
that's that.
And we got Knicks Pistons tonight as well. We didn't talk about that. My schedule's not allowed me to watch as much of that series in depth as I'd like. So if anyone was watching and wondering why we haven't touched on that, it's my end. I just have been busy with work and life and things, so I wouldn't be able to provide the level of analysis I'd like. But I'm excited for that one too. It's been really fun and chippy and gritty. So we got a fun day of hoops in store tonight, and
I mean,
a month and a half left of hoops on our NBA side, and then we flow right into the WNBA season. So good time to be a basketball fan.
No doubt, definitely, and a good shout, Knicks Pistons. Karl Anthony Towns had a little bit of a comeback, and after a rough couple games, and Cade Cunningham looks like the real deal. He might be the best player in the series. And after the Knicks built something of, in the offseason, you would have thought it was close to a super team. I mean, at least that word gets thrown around a lot, but there's sure a lot of, big name franchise player type guys, like all defensive guys, all stars, all on one squad. So, you think that, but then, here comes Cade and the upstart Pistons that are on an absolute roll, and they look like a real squad. So I'm definitely excited to see kind of who comes out on top and where the adjustments are, because Tobias Harris has been showing up. He's been really reliable for this team. Malik Beasley, obviously, we hit on like one of the best shooters in the league this year. Just obviously giving Cade like an NBA level supporting cast has mattered and has resulted in this, along with everything else. And it's just kind of cool to see 2 clearly good teams that, might not consider themselves full-blown contenders this year, but at the very least, they're both still like competing very hard and bring different dynamics to the game. And it's kind of cool to see how it plays out. And I do think, for the Knicks, at least, like Karl Anthony Towns has to be that guy. Like he's been an incredible shooter and scorer the whole year. And I saw earlier, as of game 3, he had the highest points per touch in the series. So you would think, let's get him more touches, because he only had, via Tommy Beer, he only had 36 touches in game 2, 24 front court touches. New York scored 94 points, but in game 3, he had 60 touches, 42 front court touches, and they scored 118 points. And that's where the points per touch in the series kind of comes from. So that's after 3 games. Obviously, we've had a few more since then, but early on, clearly they needed more out of Cat, and he's delivered in that one. And that's what playoff basketball is all about. We'll see how the teams adjust and go at it tonight. And maybe we get a few game 7s before we roll into round 2. Nothing, 2 best words in sports, man. Game 7.
Wouldn't mind that at all. I think Knicks Pistons and Nuggets Clippers deserve game 7s, just the way the intensity they've had and
exactly been an even matchup.
Yeah, I'm sure the teams leading 3-2 would disagree with us, but that's okay. We don't have to agree with them. We can make our own.
Yeah, we want more basketball here on the Learning Basketball Pod. We can't have enough. So I appreciate it, man. The exciting playoffs. One of the most fun seasons we've had in a minute. A lot of drama, a lot of trades, but it's cool seeing how it plays out. And I appreciate you taking the time. Just here to talk some hoops and a little Wolves versus Lakers, little Clippers Nuggets, NBA playoffs. We wrapped it up good. I appreciate you hopping on, talking some hoops, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate having me on, and always love talking playoffs, especially, but hoops in general. It's just a blast to talk with anyone who's passionate about it and knows what they're discussing. So, and obviously you fit both of those bills. So I appreciate you taking the time to extend me an invitation.
Hey, thanks for the kind words, man. You already know you got to follow Jackson Frank everywhere on Twitter and writing for Sportscasting. I really love that group. They have a really smart group, a collective over there. They're covering the league in a different way. You got to make sure you tune in there. And anything else you want to plug before we get out of here?
No, I would just say, check our work out on Sportscasting. I'm not really on Twitter much these days, but still watch a lot of basketball, trying to write. We got a great group of guys that I kind of manage as their editor, and I try and find some time to write myself. But been really fun, all the stuff they've done, and we'll have a ton more great content over the next month plus until the finals end, and maybe some drafts and free agency stuff after that. So just check us out, sportscasting.com. We're always chugging out some good content.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. Some of the best articles on there. If you want to read about basketball, they got you covered for the NBA. So, got to check it out. Thanks again, Jackson. It was a lot of fun today.
Yeah, peace.
You know what? Have a good one. Learning Basketball is a Swish Theory podcast hosted from Beyond the Arcade. Hey, that's me. You can find my work on Twitter, YouTube, Substack, and check out the team's writing at theswishtheory.com.